Hello everyone, my name is Yara and today I'm going to be doing the Unpopular Opinions book tag. Now this is like a really OG booktube book tag that I just haven't done yet, and I feel like as a booktuber it is a rite of passage to do the Unpopular Opinions book tag. The thing is though, I don't really have a lot of like really spicy unpopular opinions. Like a lot of times I'll read a book that like everyone is raving about and it's like this is the best book of all time and all this stuff, and like I'll read it and I think it's fine but like not the best book of all time, but at the same time I don't think it's like bad or anything. So I feel like it's not like the piping hot tea that everyone is looking for. And so that's kind of the reason that I've been putting it off for so long, because I've literally had this in my notes since like I started, because it is such a staple in the booktube community. But I figured I might as well just share what I do have and what I do think about these books. So yeah, I'll just get started now. So the first question is, what is a popular book or series that you didn't like? And for this one, I'm gonna go with The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I read this like over a year ago, I think, and essentially an enemies to lovers romance novel that was really popular and a lot of people were giving it 5 stars, and I gave it like 3 or 2.5 stars. Upon initially finishing it, I actually thought it was pretty cute and I enjoyed it, but the more I thought about it, the more I was realizing that it had a lot of flaws. Like the one thing that stood out to me a lot was that it felt like it existed in a vacuum, and maybe that's just the way that a lot of like romance driven stories are. Like you are only following these two people, like you really there's nothing else to care about. Not the setting, not where they're working at, not their family, even though their family kind of plays a part, but even then you just don't get enough of it. And with those kind of stories, I feel like you can still enjoy it if you are invested in the two characters that you are following enough, but like I wasn't. Like I didn't really feel that the relationship developed in a satisfying way because it was so one-sided. We only get the girl, Lucy, I think her name. Is it Lucy? I don't remember. We only get her perspective. Not until the middle/end of the book do we actually get to see what the guy thought of everything. And with a trope like rivals to lovers, I kind of want to see why both people hate each other. Like it just, also the reason for them hating each other made like no sense to me. Like there was just no explanation. Like it was so petty, and these are grown adults. So I had no patience for it. Also, I didn't like the language that the author used. Like she kept like emphasizing the fact that the girl was really small, like she was 5 foot, and the guy was really big. And the language that she used like infantilized the girl, which made her really weird in comparison to like the like macho description of the guy, for lack of a better word. I mean, take this all with a grain of salt because this was my first foray really into adult romance, but I don't think I like it too much. The next question is, what is a popular book or series that everyone else seems to hate but you love? And for this, I chose Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. Now, I know that obviously The Hunger Games is well beloved by like almost everyone, but everyone usually tends to hate the concluding novel, Mockingjay, and like I was just like baffled. To be fair, actually, the first time I read this series, I didn't like Mockingjay, but I also didn't like Catching Fire. But when I reread it a few years later, Mockingjay ended up being my favorite of the three. And I think the reason for my liking of this book is rooted in my personal experience reading it at the time that I read it. So I was born in America, but my family is from Syria, and around the time that I was reading this book, the Syrian civil war was beginning. And I remember being in school, and a lot of people, like, they knew about it, but they didn't understand it in the way that I was looking at it from, because I personally had like a personal stake in the matter. And I just remember being in like middle and elementary school and people not really understanding me, or like I felt that people weren't understanding like the gravity of the situation. And so when I read this book about a revolution that showed a lot of the costs of the revolution and a lot of the pain and suffering that goes with it, like yeah, it was depressing, but it also was kind of validating and kind of helped my younger self process a little bit what was happening. So even though it was a bit grim and depressing, it did add a lot of realism that I appreciated at the time, and also that I hadn't read in a lot of other books at that age. From a purely literary perspective, I do understand why people don't like this book, because I do think some things were rushed, but at the same time, I could see how Suzanne Collins was approaching it, trying to get a realistic war zone situation, and that some things just, they happen and you don't get time to mourn. So yeah, I really liked this book, and I really want to reread it soon now that the prequel series is coming. So the next question is, what is a love triangle where the main character ended up with the wrong person, or an OTP you don't like? And by wrong person, I mean like the person you didn't want them to end up with. So I have a lot of book couples that I'm just kind of like ambivalent about. So instead I'm gonna go with the TV couple because I'm really freaking passionate about it. and that is Jane and Raphael from Jane the Virgin. I'm not going to be going to like in-depth spoilers about Jane the Virgin, but if you do want to watch the show, just mute until the icon goes away. I don't really remember who I shipped like at the very beginning of the series, because I think almost everyone did something pretty crappy. But I do know that once like season 1 ended, I was like a hardcore Michael shipper. Like throughout season 2 and season 3, I was hardcore. I did not like Raphael. But I will admit that Raphael went through a lot of character development, and by season 4, I was actually fine with him. I thought he grew a lot, and it showed in his actions. But then, if you watch the show, you know what happens in season 5, and immediately when something complicated happens, Raphael reverts back to his toxic behaviors. They even did Michael so dirty by the end of the series, like they completely obliterated all the good qualities of his character for the sole purpose of pushing Jane and Raphael, which they also freaking messed up. I just think Jane and Raphael bring out the worst in each other, so I just don't understand why they were endgame. I didn't even finish the show. I still have like 5 episodes left, but I was just so angry that I can't finish it. The next question is, what is a popular book genre that you hardly reach for? And the first thing that came to mind was poetry, because prior to like a year ago, the only poetry that I had read was for school, and I didn't even hate it. Like I enjoyed really dissecting them and getting the symbolism and understanding what the author was trying to create. But when it comes to like reading for fun, I just never gravitate towards it. And I think it's because that when I do read, I look for a story that I think poetry collections don't always give you, at least from what I'm aware. I did read The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is written in verse, and I absolutely loved it, and it's because it has a continuous story throughout, even though that the entire thing is written like a poem. Same thing with Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. It is a book comprised of poetry, but they all revolve around this one particular scene, one particular aspect, and they all tell a story that relate to each other. So I think I don't mind poetry when it's like in this form, but when it's just like a collection of unrelated poems, I don't really find myself reaching for it. The other genre that I didn't realize I didn't reach for until recently is science fiction, but like specifically space science fiction. Like I read tons of dystopian novels, so obviously like I have forayed into the area of sci-fi, but like I never specifically want to read a book that's set in space. Like I'm not against it per se, but I just don't find myself reaching for it. And I don't hate those stories. Like I watch Star Wars and I think it's fine. I just don't have a lot of strong feelings for it. Same with Doctor Who. I did enjoy Doctor Who a little more, but I liked the fact that Doctor Who can go back in time, can go in the same time. I just didn't like when they went to other planets for some reason. I really could not tell you why. I just don't have any inclination to read books about space. The only exception to this was The Martian by Andy Weir, and I think it's because this book is really grounded in science, like in reality, even though it does take place on Mars, and I'm a nerd and I like science, and it's also freaking hilarious. So yeah, maybe it's just space fantasy that I don't like. I don't know. Oh yeah, and I also liked Ender's Game, so I think it is space fantasy that I don't like. So the next question is, what is a popular or beloved character that you don't like? And for this one, I didn't really have a strong answer, so I had to dig deep in the back brain, and I picked Jacob Black from Twilight. I wasn't really in like the Twilight fandom, so I don't really know what people who read the books, like what their consensus were. But I remember like in terms of the movies, it was pretty even split between Team Edward and Team Jacob. And like I just remember the books, I freaking hated Jacob. He was so annoying. I don't even remember like exact reasons. I just remember him being so annoying. I just wanted him to leave Bella alone because she kept saying to leave her alone. I think in the movies he's less annoying, but also it's been so long, I really could not tell you. But that's my answer, that's all I could think of. Oh, also Rose from Vampire Academy, but I don't think that's like unpopular. I think I liked her near the end of the series because she grew a lot, but I remember the first book, she was so freaking annoying because she was so like self-absorbed and entitled. But yeah, again, it's been so long, I can't really give you specific details about why. That's just the feeling that I remember. So what is a popular author that you can't seem to get into? Again, this was a hard question for me to answer because I don't typically read a lot from the same author unless I really tend to like their things. So there haven't been many or any times where like I've tried an author, didn't like it, and I've tried again, I didn't like it. I'll usually probably give up after the first try. I guess you could say John Green because it's just very hit or miss because I read Fault in Our Stars when it was like, you know, really popular and I really enjoyed it. And I read Turtles All the Way Down when it came out and I loved that book. But then I tried to read Paper Towns and I just couldn't. I had to put it down. I just could not get past how annoying the main character was. I don't know why, the writing style just irked me. So I don't know. John Green is an enigma to me. I love him as a person and his YouTube channel, but his writing is just very hit or miss. The other author that I thought about for this was Holly Black, though this is not really that fair for me to say. The only thing I read from her is the Spiderwick Chronicles, which I did really like, but it's been like over 10 years since I read that, so I can't really give a proper review or really share my feelings about it, but I did like it at the time. But I thought I could say her because she's been releasing books for years, ever since like I started watching BookTube like back in 2012. Like I always saw people talking about Holly Black books, and every single time I just don't feel inclined to reach for it. I think it's because she writes mostly about fae, and I really don't know why I don't want to read about fae. Like it's nothing like specifically against it, I guess. I don't know why, it's so weird. Space and fairies apparently I don't want to read about. But again, I haven't really tried any of those fae books, so it's really not fair for me to include her on that list, but I thought that I would just mention that. The next question is, what is a popular book trope that you were tired of seeing? So like not including tropes that are like actually problematic, I would say enemies to lovers that is not slow burn. And again, this is purely personal preference, but I can't root for a relationship if I can't understand, one, why they hate each other to begin with and why that changed. And I feel like I only feel satisfied when it's slow burn. Another one is like the absent parent, and this is not so much the ones where a parent has died, but more the ones where like the parent is present, is there, but they're not present, if you get what I mean. Like maybe it's just because of the way I was raised, but sometimes I look at these kids doing things in YA books and I'm like, where are your parents? Why have they not called you? Why are you not checking in with them? And this is mostly in contemporary books because I feel like in fantasy, you can probably get away with more, but even then, like at least like show that you have a relationship with your parents. And then we can show some more healthy relationships with parents as opposed to more unhealthy ones. The next question is, what is a popular book or series that you have no interest in reading? And honestly, the ACOTAR series, I just do not care enough to read that series. At one point I really considered it because when they first came out, everyone was giving them like 5 stars, and at the time I really liked the Throne of Glass series, so I was like, hey, why not give it a shot? But then recently this whole wave of people giving him like 1 stars came, and I started watching those reviews, and then I was curious to see which side I would fall under, but now I just don't care. Like there are so many books I want to read, and those are pretty hefty books, so I don't want to. And last, what is a movie or TV show adaptation that you think is better than the book? Because usually, you know, we say the book is always better. And for this one, I chose The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Even though I kind of view them the same, like I like them both equally for different reasons. Like to be honest, I kind of prefer the movie format for this kind of story. Like I love the music, the visuals, just the aesthetic of everything. And I thought it told the story in such an honest way that really engaged my emotions more than the book did. And I think it's because the book is told in letter format, and I just kind of felt like this inherent disconnection from the story. It's probably just a me problem, but I preferred the movie format. But at the same time, I do think the movie didn't get to explore a lot of details that the book got to explore, like the sibling relationship and the whole entire thing with Charlie's sister and her getting an abortion. But if we did get to explore that, then I think the movie would have been definitely better than the book in my opinion. So that's all the questions. Please let me know your answers to these questions because I'm really curious to see what your unpopular opinions are because they're so much fun to talk about. Also let me know if you agree with my unpopular opinions because that'll be fun. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you later. Bye!